Mr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, member of the Congress party as well. Sir, thank you for taking the time out. I would like to start where we left with Mr. Qureshi. In your view, the judgment today of the Supreme Court, because the opposition has been raising a lot of questions as far as the functioning of the Election Commission is concerned, how do you view this judgment, and will this now put an end at least to the allegations and the accusations that the opposition has been making on the Election Commission?
Well, let me start by saying that it's a historic judgment. It's a momentous judgment. It's a very, very special judgment, and in particular, because unfortunately in several judgments, the Supreme Court says the right thing, encapsulates the right thing, lays the right principle, but does not walk the talk in the result. Here they have walked the talk in the result. Secondly, there has been this supreme irony that on the one hand, level playing field, democracy, free and fair elections is part of the basic structure. And you know, the basic structure means that you cannot even amend it by a constitutional amendment. The constitutional amendment is itself unconstitutional. And on the other hand, the mega policeman tasked, entrusted and charged with the responsibility of maintaining that level playing field has a very poor selection process, entirely executive based. So this was an anachronism, a complete anomaly, which, of course, I must say that it has not been misused by and large. But I must equally say that the assault on institutions has been so acute in the last 7-8 years, across the board in different institutions, that I think this was a very timely judgment to strengthen the selection process of the EC.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the election in the Northeast. Again, you know, it's the Congress party has done very poorly. In Tripura, your partnership with the left seems to have worked to a certain extent, but nowhere enough to actually come to power. This being the case, and we've heard the word introspection time and time again from the Congress, where does it leave you? The Northeast is where the Congress used to dominate, and certainly in states like Meghalaya.
Well, first of all, I'm taken aback because I was told that I am here only to speak on the Election Commission. But since there is a small breach of promise by you, let me nevertheless answer the question. I think the Northeast, one state can hardly be called a BJP victory. It is nothing but riding completely piggyback. I straightaway confess that riding piggyback, they have been far more successful than the Congress, because from some time now, money power has been used to do that. Not now, but before. And therefore, you really can't gloat, as the BJP appears to do, in a BJP victory in at least one of those three states. But Tripura, I think, is the real takeaway in their favor. And I think there must be a lot of work. I don't agree with the fact that parties who are all part of the secular non-NDA fold should have stood at all in Tripura. There should have been one large Mahagathbandhan, and that has cost us dearly. The other states, I think, are all matters of really riding piggyback, joining parties. In fact, in one state, as you know, completely the entire party, the Congress party, had been hijacked. I don't think it's really electoral, but I think there is certainly a very great misuse of electoral bonds for some time now in the Northeast states.
Okay. Let me bring you back then, sir, on the judgment of the Supreme Court today. While you make this point that, at this, the institutions are under attack, the BJP then says that, look what was happening when the Congress was also ruling. And they give the example of Mr. Gill when he was the election commissioner. Immediately after his retirement, he went to the Rajya Sabha, supported by the Congress party. So will this serve as an example? What has happened today will serve as an example that these kind of other, incidents don't take place again, because the questions have been raised again and again on successive governments.
So I have 2 or 3 answers very quickly and briefly. First and foremost, there is no doubt that there have been aberrations. For every Gill example, I can give you equally a Chaturvedi example of the CAG by the BJP, and I can give you several more, including a former Chief Justice of India in the Rajya Sabha. That is not relevant. What is relevant is that anybody who is objective and fair and honest puts his hand on his head, on his heart, will find and say that, generally speaking, in the last 8 years, a general assault or subversion or control freak approach to institutions in India is unprecedented in the previous 70 years of Indian history. That, I think, is an incontrovertible statement, and that includes other non-Congress governments, including the Vajpayee government, in comparison. And I think, given that fact, this is a historic judgment. I must remind you, because institutional memory is short, as recent as the 2019 general elections, I was in charge, in fact, of many of the complaints to the Election Commission. And in every complaint, about 25 major ones, about 17 or 18 of them, there was a decision this way or the other. And in many of them, there was, in fact, rectification action taken. But in the 5 complaints involving the Prime Minister and the Home Minister,
right,
the Election Commission adopted a very strange approach. They just didn't decide. And in the 7-week window for an election, we had to go to the Supreme Court to get a mandamus to just decide something this way or that way. And you know that the one election commissioner who deferred or dissented, what fate he met, how he was lampooned.
You're talking about Mr. Lavasa, right?
Yes, and how he had to ultimately leave his post.
Right.
But the most important point is, today now with this judgment, you have broadly I'm saying, a uniformity in the major institutions, and that's an important takeaway. In the Lokpal, in the NHRC, now in the EC, broadly the CBI has a similar procedure, the CVC. However, and I have asked for that in a press conference today, there is absolutely no doubt that to restore at least a vestige of confidence in fair prosecution, the ED must have the same.
All right.
On what basis must you deny this to the ED? The government of India has been going in the opposite direction. Far from thinking, they have in fact made a law which allows them to extend the ED director's tenure each year on year, but only by 1 year for a total of 5 years.
Okay, Dr. Singhvi, lots of important points that you mentioned. I'm just interrupting you now because I need to move on to my panel, of which I always invite you to remain, but you never do. But thanks so much for sharing your views on what is without doubt a landmark judgment.